Welcome to the Sens Spotlight podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. Before we get started, go all the way with Betway and get a free bet up to $200 if your first bet loses. Scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and redeem your welcome offer. Offer is only available for new customers. Terms and conditions apply. Offer available in Ontario. Must be 18 plus. Please play responsibly. Before we get started, today on the show, it's a really good friend of mine who we have a great relationship with, but it's a bit love-hate with the one and only Graeme Nichols of Coming in Hot podcast and the hockey news. So we always have pretty spirited debates and good conversations. So I think people will enjoy this. And hit it, Shane.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Sens Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson, bursts the speed, gets a shot away, score! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And Graeme, we will welcome him to the show. Graeme, how are you, man? How's it going?
I'm sick, Alex. How's it going on?
I knew you'd say something like that.
Everything's going well?
It's great. Things are great. What's it been like for you? Like, just on a personal note, the past year has been quite transformative for you. Like, obviously you were in the hockey world for a while, but what's it been like to be part of a trio of podcasters and being around the team all the time for the hockey news and Coming in Hot? Like, how much fun have you been having along this ride?
Yeah, it's been a blast, man. It's been a blast. Like I started blogging way back, so I've been like at it for a while, but then it finally seemed like everything kind of broke right last year. Like Steve Warren approached me last summer about writing for the hockey news, doing some work for them, and I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. Only if it leads to like more access and the opportunity to get accredited, and that was kind of the avenue. I wanted something different. I wanted to challenge something new, and that was the route that I pursued. And then I wound up being, going to games, going to practices, and I just wound up by chance having the opportunity to sit beside you in the press box, and the opportunity on my right to sit beside Brent Wallace, right, from Coming in Hot. So over the first few weeks of the season, forged new relationships and friendships with several of the media members here, including yourself. But I think just by chance and by luck, just sitting beside Brent's kind of allowed me to go on his podcast and had a great time. And I think that just opened up some avenues to say, hey, if you're interested, you can come back whenever you want. So I jumped on that opportunity, and things have kind of I've taken off a little bit from there. So it's been a lot of fun, a lot of responsibility, a lot of work and commitments and stuff, but it's been fun, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. Nothing feels like work for me. And fortunately, like, my family's been fully supportive of me, and have they've patiently allowed me to go out, go to games at night, and I've got 2 young children at home, so that's been kind of like the balancing act. You're trying to balance the family life with the this fun side gig of mine, and so far my wife's been really supportive, and it's been fantastic, so I can't complain.
I know, just around the rink with the guys, do you feel like you have a little bit of camaraderie with the guys that have kids, like Giroux and Tkachuk and all of them?
I don't know. Like, I haven't really bonded too much about that. Like, I was talking to at the golf course the other day, I was just talking to Michael Amadio, asking how his daughter was doing and stuff, and he mentioned that she's 2 and she's starting to get into like these activities and stuff, and that's like the fun stage, where it's like they're participating in those activities. They understand and kind of recognize the holidays a little bit more, and they're at that fun age. So I guess in some sense, not with too many of the players, but like, I always joke with the guys who have like more than 2 kids. Like, I only have 2, and the challenge for me is like, there's one for each of like my wife and I. So like, our time is kind of balanced between those 2. But when the kids start outnumbering the parents, like, like a David Perron or something, or a Claude Giroux, I'm like, I have no idea how you guys do it. And they just kind of laugh and say it gets done. You adjust and stuff. But I've got so much respect for people that have more than 2 kids, because I cannot imagine the time and work and energy that is spent hurting them. So yeah.
Trying to do my best transition. Do you feel like a little bit of a little kid, like just being around the NHLers now? Like, I know my first year on the beat, and even to some degree last year, it was still like That's Brady Tkachuk. That's kind of crazy. Like now it doesn't feel that way, but it definitely did for a while. Like, did you have like some of those pinch me moments throughout the year?
I think there's always a bit of like surrealism to it, right? Like, as a young kid who followed this team, grew up watching this team, my parents were season ticket holders. You always kind of admire the players and what they go through and the success and fame that these people have. But then, yeah, like, you go into the dressing room last year and I was a bit of a wallflower for the first little bit, wasn't asking like too many questions, just happy to be there kind of thing for the first little bit, take everything in. And then, you start developing relationships and rapport with people and it's kind of surreal. There's just like small incidents where it's like, like Shane Pinto's trying to get by me in the hallway while a scrum's being conducted. And he says, "Oh, sorry, Graeme." And he sneaks around you. You're like, "Oh man, he dressed me by name. He knows exactly who I am." So it's like, there's those moments like that. But I think the weird part is, and it's still, I don't know if I'll get over it, but it's just like hearing executives and people of power, whether it's like Dave Poulin or Stu Steos, just like say, "Hey, Graeme, how's it going?" And you're just like, you just shake your head. It's kind of it's cool, but at the same time, you don't want to be starstruck too much either. And these people are people, right? They are human. They have interests. They're no different than you or I. And they're responsible for a professional hockey team, and they're like high performance athletes and everything else. But they are people first and foremost, and you treat them with respect, and you hope that they treat you the same way.
I find it interesting where you feel like I wouldn't say power, but you definitely feel like that moderator for fans, right? Like, and I think we both do a pretty good job about that. I mean, we both grew up Sens fans, and now we're in this position of kind of being, this kind of the conveyor of information and kind of holding of account to the team. And it's interesting because we've kind of come in at a good time, right? Like it was such lean years for the Senators team for so long, right? And I think ownership had a huge part in that, and I wouldn't make any bones about that. But it's interesting to see the kind of rise of this team, and I'm really curious, like just for this season, like how they're going to react when they start losing or go on a little skid, or maybe they're world beaters. Like I do see a scenario where, at least through the regular season, but it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that pressure of now having a bit of a people are going after them in the Atlantic. They want to take them down. If you're Detroit, Buffalo, even the Habs to some degree, like they're going to have a bit of an X on, the calendar when they play them as a team that, is good, but not great yet. And I'm curious how they react to that.
Yeah. And just to go back to your first point, I think like you and I entered at a time when the team's on its upswing. And I think like first and foremost, I think, throughout my writing career, whether it was doing freelance stuff for The Athletic or just blogging or doing stuff for the Hockey News, like I pride myself on speaking the truth and putting my opinions in truth. I don't want to like beat around the bush or anything. So like I'll try and portray truths in a fair way. I don't want to I'm never going to blast someone for no reason. Like there's always going to be some validation.
Not going to be a jerk.
Yeah. Like nothing's mean spirited, and I think like if you can balance fair reporting with, the interests of the player, the interests of the team, the interests of the fans, it's just a giant balancing act. But like I think first and foremost, you just have to be fair and you have to be honest. And I think people respect that, and it is. I guess it's easy to say like the team is on the upswing, so like they haven't experienced too many of those tough moments to this point. But eventually, I think you're right. I think eventually there will be times where it's things will be harder. You might have to write some harder things, and that's going to be part of the challenge moving forward. But as of right now, it's been fantastic dealing with like Ian and Sly and Aaron Campbell. Like it's been super easy, and just the access and if the request, by and large, like they will go out of their way to meet them. So that part's been super easy. But I think as the stakes get a little bit bigger and this team kind of transitions from that rebuilding club that we've been watching for several years now, and they start transitioning to that mode where it's like, okay, people anticipate that we're going to be in the middle of the pack, like you mentioned. Teams like Buffalo, Detroit, Montreal will have a target on Ottawa's back. They're the de facto natural organization that others will look at to say, hey, maybe we won't be able to catch Tampa or Toronto or possibly Florida, but like Ottawa's a team that might be attainable. We might be able to surpass those. So it's like dealing with those expectations and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Senators to replicate last year's success. I don't think fans are, eventually it's like, yes, it's great, you're back in the postseason, But eventually there's going to come a time where it's like, well, okay, guys, it's more than reaching the postseason. We got to take that next natural ascension and step forward. And that, until that happens, I think the pressure's only going to ratchet up.
I feel it's like the thing that in every sport it feels like the sophomore slump, right? And I feel like the Sens are in this position where it's like, is this real, or is this kind of a shot in the dark where everything kind of came together? The Atlantic took a step back, and that's how they made it into the playoffs. I feel much more confident. Like, not that I believe in the team like Steve Stais does, but I'm more of the mind like that was a natural progression. They finally learned how to win under Travis Green, who I think deserves a lot of credit for instilling like great defensive principles from the start of camp. They became a well-rounded team. They got goaltending with Linus Ullmark, but I think you look at their young core, and I don't want to say it too often, but everything's there for this team to be sustainably good. Now, how good can they be? I think that's a good question, and something that we'll obviously find out in the next 5 years, but I don't know if they have enough superstar, just elite creme de la creme kind of talent that other teams do in the Eastern Conference and in the NHL. But I think they have a core that's pretty sustainable, locked in for the most part for the next couple of years, and pretty young. Like, most of their team is 23, 24, 25, 26. Like, they should be just getting better in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So I think they're in a really good position. I think the one guy that, you would always joke to me in the press box that I had like huge affinity for Jake Sanderson and kind of was in love with him just because I loved his game. And he is a very nice guy to deal with, but I think he's almost a bit of the tipping point where I think, because to me, outside of Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, I see his pathway moving forward as one of the 3, 4, 5 best defensemen. Like, I don't feel too worried about his ascension, to be honest. And I think if you have that kind of guy with a number one center with Tkachuk, like, you're going to be a pretty freaking good team. But I'm curious what you think Sanderson needs to improve upon this coming year to kind of get into that category or that echelon of player.
Well, I'll just start by saying, like, I think Ottawa's in a very unique spot relative to just looking at the teams that made the postseason last year that finished ahead of them. I think, like, if you look at Florida's relative age, I think if you look at Tampa's relative age, even Toronto's, like, those are older teams where their window, especially I think with Tampa especially, I think the windows are beginning to close a little bit, especially like they don't have a ton of future assets coming into the organization to replenish the guys who are aging and starting to go into their declining years. So I think like there is an opportunity for a team like Ottawa, whose core is young, like you mentioned, to naturally grow that way. And as like a Tampa potentially starts to slip, Ottawa can fill that void. But I think like there are concerns, right? Like, I think if you look at the teams behind Ottawa, like, I don't think a team like Montreal is there yet to necessarily surpass Ottawa. I think a lot would have to go right for Montreal, but I think like where those organizations might have like an edge long term over Ottawa potentially is that they also have good young talent available to them, and their pipelines are pretty full. And the guys that they have already at the parent roster, like, they're only going to develop and get better. So I think like there might come a time down the road where some of those younger teams might start to surpass Ottawa, just based on the fact that Ottawa's pipeline of prospects is pretty barren right now. I think like aside from like Carter Yakimchuk and a few select others, like, I don't think there's a lot of high upside pro potential, at least at the NHL level, for many of these prospects. So what you see is what you get with Ottawa. So it's just a matter of, like you said, like they might need another piece to go to that next level. And I think you're right. I think the question facing this team right now is like, well, how do you go and get that other piece? Where do you find that other piece? But I think to the organization's credit, I think like Steve Stais and his staff have done an excellent job. And this is where they've kind of differentiated themselves from their predecessor and the previous regime, is that they don't necessarily get the biggest name fits or the biggest name acquisitions. They go and get the best fit. And I know like a guy like Fabian Zetterlund, for example, didn't perform at or at least produce at a high level last year. But I think if you look at his underlying metrics, I think he's a fantastic performer in terms of just the volume of chances and shots that he created, the individual expected goal rates. I think there's a lot of upside there that it was unfulfilled. I think like once he has a summer of off season, he's comfortable here. He knows the players, he knows the system, everything else. I think it's just a natural progression for him to kind of normalize the stats and just have a very productive year for the Ottawa Senators.
Where do you feel like Zetterlund fits in this lineup, because I think that that's going to be something that we'll really see evolve over the course of training camp for Travis Green. Because I find they're kind of in a conundrum where they have probably they probably have 10 guys that you can put in their top 9, but there's almost that like extra piece that you don't know where to put, right? And at some points last year, that was Fabian Zetterlund on the 4th line, or Michael Madio sliding down to the 4th line, and they didn't really bring in anyone, and that's okay, but it doesn't feel like there's a clear winger for Tim Stützle on the right side right now. You have Brady Tkachuk on the left, and Giroux's played really well with him, but he's declined a bit, and he's just getting older, and it's, father time. And then you look at Dylan Cousins, and he seems to be playing with Drake Batherson, which I don't actually feel as confident about as like a duo. I kind of would be curious to see Drake Batherson on the top line with Timmy and Tkachuk, honestly. But it just, I don't know where Fabian Zetterlund fits, and I don't know where Claude Giroux fits on this lineup now that he's a bit older. Where do you think those two guys should play?
I think based on his contract alone, he's going to get top 6 minutes, whether it's like second line left wing behind Brady or on the top line on the right side, playing with Timmy and Brady. But I think like the luxury that Ottawa has, like you mentioned, is you probably have like 10 forwards who can go up and down the lineup and play with anyone. And I guess like it's just going to be injuries inevitably are going to happen, and you're going to mix and match. Like David Perron's not a 4th line winger on any team. It's just that's his de facto position because the Senators have been so strong. And I think the one thing that kind of worked against Zetterlund early in his tenure here in Ottawa is that Ottawa, at the time they acquired him, had so many guys in their top 9 who were playing at a high level, whether that was Ridley Gregg, Michael Amadio. And then you had like an elder guy like Claude Giroux, who might have taken a step back production wise, but like you look at his on ice impacts offensively and defensively, and he's still playing good hockey. And he almost had 20 goals. He almost had 20 goals, and he put up 50 plus points, but like, that's not a bad season. Is it what we've expected out of Claude Giroux based on his 2 previous years of performance? No, but he still played at a high level. And I think like he acknowledged at his end of the year press availability, like everybody on that team kind of like accepted less offense to play a better defensive role. And that's the way that the team needs to play to have success. And I kind of respect that. But at the same time, I think like if you can get Claude Giroux's shooting rate, which was, I believe it was the lowest of his career at 5-on-5, back to where it was maybe like 2 years ago, he's a guy who can easily get back to that 20 goal threshold. And then all of a sudden, if Zetterlund produces and Claude Giroux gets back to that threshold, I think you're going to spend a lot less time worried about this 5-on-5 offense.
I'm curious because if you look at the underlying numbers, and we're both stats guys to some degree. I think you're more of the analytics guru than I am, but in many ways, you look at how they produced at 5-on-5. The stats wouldn't have bared out that they would be that bad at producing 5-on-5 goals. They would be more middle of the pack-ish. Not great at generating chances offensively, but not as bad as they finished. And I think adding Jordan Spence ahead of Travis Hamonic makes a huge deal just in terms of keeping possession, generating chances in the offensive zone that Ottawa would just lose out because of Hamonic or Nicholas Manpalo. And no slight on those guys, but they're not offensive drivers. But the thing I can't square is how much was the offense struggling because of talent and how much was it because of just a bit unlucky, right? And hockey can be that way, right? And I think more of it was on like not being lucky last season as much it was like this like massive struggle to create any chances at 5-on-5. I don't think their stats were representative of how well they played. At the same time, to win hockey games, especially in the playoffs, you need to be a really good 5-on-5 team, and that's not what what the Senators were last year. So it's an area I think they need to improve, but I wonder how much Travis Green's going to kind of unleash some of these guys offensively, because he literally to a man said like we didn't really do anything about offensive schemes in training camp, which is kind of astonishing, but also makes sense because the team was a tire fire in their own end and he wanted to instill those defensive principles, and it worked. Like Ottawa became one of the stingiest defensive teams, and it's not like they have Sasha Barkov on their team, as good as Shane Pinto is. So I'm just really curious, like what you think. Like, do you think Ottawa will be better at scoring 5-on-5 or significantly better, or do you think they'll just be kind of league average or even a bit worse than that?
I think inevitably it's going to normalize it. And this goes back to your point about Hamonic, and I've raised this point on the Coming in Hot podcast last week. Like, statistically, Travis Hamonic was the worst, one of the worst impactful defensemen on a team performance level last season, right? Like, I think if you look at his 800 plus 5-on-5 minutes that he played last season, it's just too much. And statistically, of the defensemen in the league who's played more than 500 minutes, Travis Hamonic, when he was on the ice, the Senators scored on like 2.6% of their shots. It was the lowest percentage in the entire NHL. So replacing him with an elite puck mover like Jordan Spence, his controlled exits, his ability to transition the puck from the defensive zone to the offensive zone are just ridiculously high. He was one of the best guys in LA for doing that. And he did that on a very good Los Angeles team. But if you replace Travis Hamonic by Jordan Spence, just with his puck moving value there, inevitably your team's going to get exponentially better. And that's without even playing a game. It's just, that's the nature of it. It's and that's just one small player. And, if you extend that to Nick Jensen, for example, like Thomas Chabot and Nick Jensen, their pairing was one of the best in the NHL at the time that Nick Jensen got injured at around New Year's Eve. So if you can I'm not saying Jensen will be able to get back to the same level that he exhibited in the first few months of the season with Chabot, but that pairing was a top 10 pairing in the NHL based off analytics. If they can get close to that, while Jordan Spence buoys the third pairing with Tyler Kleven, who had a fantastic second half last year, and he looked incredibly competent and confident in the postseason against Toronto. And then you have Jake Sanderson, who's now shed and rid himself of the Travis Hamonic anchor, and he plays with someone competent. You're talking about obviously that's predicated on Artem Zub being healthy for a full season, which he hasn't done in a bit too. But once you add those pieces together, especially on the back end, and you have like a Nick Manpalo as your seventh defenseman who played competently enough last year, and nothing flashy, but a big physical presence and a big defender. Once you add those pieces together, I think if you look at Ottawa's back end, like the depth has markedly improved from where it was last year. Last year, the biggest question for us is like, oh God, if Artem Zub gets hurt or if Nick Jensen gets hurt, like who's filling those minutes? And the expectation at the beginning of last season was well, maybe to be JBD, and then it just wound up being Travis Hamonic, and Travis Hamonic played essentially a top four role for the majority of last season. And the fact that happened, and you look at that 2.6% shooting percentage, you're like, man, like they overcame some hurdles last year on the defensive side of the puck, and this year I think by and large you could argue that their defense is like arguably the strongest part of this team right now. So if you look at the 5-on-5 scoring, I think it starts and ends on the back end, and I think the forwards will benefit markedly from the play of the guys playing behind them.
I guess the two things is I completely agree. Like, I think Jordan Spence, as you said, exponentially, markedly, whatever word you want to use, like just makes them not just better defensively by the sheer force of just being able to get out of his own end, but also just on the offensive side. Like you talk about 5-on-5 scoring, like I know that the Senators organization knew that they needed to improve the right side of their defense in terms of offensive production and producing chances and everything of the like. And Jordan Spence is literally like a prime example of a guy. He's not going to put up, 50, 60 points, but he creates chances. He keeps pucks in play. He is just a really good puck mover and creator really from the right side. And Ottawa really hasn't had anyone of that ilk, in this iteration of the team. No slight to Artem Zub or Nicholas Manapalo and Nick Jensen. But the other thing I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if I worry about this, but what do you think of Travis Green going into this season? Because he did deploy Travis Hamonic for all that amount of time when he was struggling. And Jordan Spence isn't a big guy. Like this team, this D-core is not big, right? And I wouldn't say outside of Tyler Kleven incredibly physical. I think Zub and Jensen put up a good fight for, bang for their buck for their size, but they're not imposing figures on the back end. And I'm just curious how he deploys Spence, because he didn't like JBD because, and I think Jordan Spence is a much better player than JBD, but he's slight, not the most physical, and that's kind of like Spence. So where do you think Travis Green will put him in the lineup? Jordan Spence in the lineup.
I'm assuming Nick Jansen won't be healthy enough to start the season with the Senators. So my expectation would be that Jordan Spence gets the first opportunity to play with Jake Sanderson.
Yeah.
I would just actually no, sorry, I should say like he'll play with Tom Shabbat 100%.
Do you think that
like 100%?
Aaron
I think
can do well enough defensively?
Jake Sanderson, yeah, between the two, like they're such good skaters, the two of them. Like their puck retrieval and exits are going to be clean, super, super clean. And I have like Nick Jansen's not the most physical guy. He's not the biggest guy himself either, but he excels through his his gap control, his ability to skate. And I think Jordan Spence is the same way. Like he just defends differently. He's not. You're right. Like he's not your prototypical NHL defender. He's not a Nick Madenpalo who's going to use his size and reach to disrupt plays. Like he's going to beat you with his stick, his compete, and just his ability to process the game at a high level. And I think that's how he's going to defend ultimately for this team. But I would expect him to start with Shabbat, and then that, depending on how he performs, it's going to raise questions when Jensen inevitably comes back. Is like, okay, how does this affect the pecking order? And if Spence is playing at a high level with Shabbat, is that something you want to break up? And ultimately, that's a quality of depth concern. Whether it's Jensen on the third pair or Spence on the third pair, you're adding elements that they just didn't have last year. There wasn't that quality of depth on the right side, and it's just going to benefit the team. And we worry about line combinations and pairings and stuff at the end of the year, and eventually it works itself out. But just going back to your point about Travis Green and my thoughts on him for this coming season, I think like you're right. Like you mentioned earlier in the show, like they created a defensive structure and a base and a foundation that they could build forth, because previously under different coaches, like DJ Smith let them run and gun. He would let the guys blow the zone frequently when pucks were turned over inside the defensive zone and try and create offense and shoot for offense that way. And under DJ, that's just under Travis Green, that doesn't happen anymore. Or if it does happen, it's very rare. So I think there is a bit of pressure, not necessarily on him to repeat the success that the team had last year, but just to maybe open up the offense, get things going. But I think there's enough. I'm not overly concerned about it either. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing that I think that this team has that maybe DJ didn't really have in prior iterations of the Sens team that would underperform, especially on the defensive side, is they have a lot of guys that are good in their own and just like naturally, like Michael Amadio, Claude Giroux is always very good defensively. Like Shane Pinto and Ridley Gregg have really become like really good defensive players. You bring in Lars Eller, who's really known for being that kind of fourth line center who's just like penalty kills in the right place at the right time, just knows how to play the game the right way. Like it's not just, you can tell a coach, hey, I want this team to play defensively, but if he doesn't have players that are two-way players, the team's probably not going to be that great. And I think that's something that Steve Staios, I think deserves a lot of credit for, just as you mentioned, like the right fits in terms of, okay, our team struggles defensively, so I'm going to bring in guys that are not kind of flight risks in their own end. Like David Perron, not like, fleet of foot, but like he knows where to go. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes. Same with Amadio and Nick Cousins to a certain extent as well. And obviously Nick Jensen for Jacob Chikrin, which is really like Chikrin's all offense. Jensen's like a much better defensive player. So I think the thing with Green is I think he has the ability to be like, okay, let me like turn up the offense like a little bit, because I have players that aren't going to get burned defensively as much as if DJ Smith did in prior iterations when you sign guys like Tarasenko or, bringing back Ryan Dzingel or whoever, right, that are just more kind of one-way offense only players. And I think that's why I feel pretty confident in this team that like it's almost like they have a really low bar, like a floor. I mean, like I don't see this team falling apart because, as you said, the depth on the defense is way better than it was in prior years. I still worry about the left side because I don't think they have like a suitable replacement if Clevin, Shabbat, Sanderson go down. We'll see with PTOs that could happen down the line. But you look at the forward group. If Tim Stutzle goes down, that's awful. But you have Shane Pinto and Dylan Cousins that like you can put into the top two lines, and you're like, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and Ridley Gregg can slide over to center as well, right? So that they have that depth. But like getting just going back to Travis Green, like I know you just kind of have to wait and to see how Ottawa looks in the preseason, what they're integrating, what their style and structure is going to be. Because I think like you're right. Like I think like the key for this team this year is like, okay, we have this foundation. How do we preserve that foundation of being structurally sound defensively while incorporating more offense? How do we get more offense out of this group? And I'm hoping it's just a natural result of getting better defensemen. But I think if that doesn't happen, then that will continue to raise questions because Ottawa finished 31st in the league last year in 5-on-5 goals. And I think if you look at the penalty kill unit that was like widely maligned, I think like those are the instances where I think it's like, okay, like that there were some obvious issues last year with the penalty kill. Like what have we learned over the offseason in terms of like performance review, structural review, looking at the systems that the most successful teams in the league are deploying? Are they going to start trying to integrate and copy? It's a copycat league, so are they going to start doing that? And those are going to be the things to watch early in the preseason.
That's something really interesting. And like I would write about how like I was just not a fan of the penalty kill. I don't think it ever worked. I get the concept in terms of last season, Travis Green installed essentially a box system where, you're basically zonal. And so you basically have the 4 players in a box unit and you kind of move and match. The thing is that it kind of, if you could break down a little bit of the zone, like in basketball or even football to some degree, then you leave space wide open for almost like tic-tac-toe goals. Right. So, and it felt like that happened, and they were, one of the worst PK units in the league, and they scored a bunch of shorthanded goals. Like it wasn't like they, couldn't do anything on the PK, and Travis Green deserves that as well. But I think you're right. It's going to be interesting to see if just Travis Green as a coach who talks about, always evolving, always getting better, which I honestly believe like that's kind of the goal of coaches is always to try to find an upper edge on the opponent. But I wonder if he brings back that same zonal system or goes more to a man-to-man, which is like what most teams primarily do. And there's iterations of it as well. And I'm not going to say that I'm a PK expert, but a much more like traditional type of PK unit. And we're not going to have, 12 minutes on the PK, but I think that is going to be an interesting kind of storyline moving forward is like, how much does Travis Green continue what worked last season and change what didn't? And how much is he going to maybe even change what did work or try to kind of perfect the craft, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he evolves and how this team evolves with him.
Yeah, I think just in regards to the diamond formations that they deployed, like at times they got in trouble when it was way too passive. Like they were just waiting for something to happen. They would collapse a little bit to the middle. Obviously, like their intent is to take away the middle, take away like the slot options, and it afforded the guy down low on the goal line tons of room to operate and to come out front. And it was just very passive. When they got in trouble a lot when it was very passive and the defenseman got caught too high. And I thought it looked really good when they were aggressive and when they were pushing the pace and pushing the puck carriers and forcing teams to make mistakes by making quicker decisions. And I think that's when it's effective, and maybe they'll keep going with it this season. We'll see what happens. Obviously the personnel changes will be important. You mentioned Eller. I think he'll be invaluable in that role. And I think like, you looking at other examples around the league where like high skill players are getting those opportunities. Like Toronto, they had Marner and Matthews playing those roles, and we saw the success that they had in the postseason doing it. Maybe there's an opportunity for Tim Stutzle to get into that kind of role where guys who can skate and process the game at a high level will start getting those opportunities, especially now that they're older, more mature, have earned more of the coach's trust. I think like that can be important, but I think, like Ridley Gregg is valuable. Shane Pinto is valuable. Eller will be there. And maybe you'll see a guy like Stutzle get an opportunity to do that. So it's going to be fun. Like that, those are the stories that you're going to be watching early in the year. Like what kind of adjustments has this team made over the offseason? What are they going to try and integrate early on? And we'll see where it goes.
It's interesting just on the PK, and I swear for some listeners that are like maybe thinking this is a lot of PK talk, but I talked to a former NHLer this season or over the summer about just like the diamond formation. And he was saying something interesting where it was like, you don't want to be thinking all the time. Like you don't want to be like, especially on the PK where you're like making read. You just kind of want to like essentially instead of like trying to anticipate, you're the aggressive player. And you're, as you mentioned, when the PK was doing well for the Sens, the players are really aggressive rather than making reads and kind of being a bit more passive. And he said that was kind of the problem a little bit with the diamond formation, is that you're kind of constantly making reads. So you can't just instinctually like go into the corner and try to, push a guy off the puck and rim it out. You're like, oh shoot, do I need to go? And that half second leaves space for, one of the best players in the world, like a Nikita Kucherov or Connor McDavid, to make a seam pass and then bang, it's a goal, right? And so I'm just curious to see how kind of that evolves and if Travis Green brings it back. I guess for team itself, and you mentioned Tim Stutzle, like I think I wouldn't say it's a conundrum, but I still don't know who he is in a sense. I know he's really freaking good at hockey, and I'm not worried about him, like his future or anything like that. But, he had essentially a point per game season last year, was way better defensively. We talked about it. We've written about it. But he hasn't hit that 90-point mark where it felt like, okay, he could get in that like 100-point type of guy who's that elite superstar center. And I think he's still on track to become that. But he's just not scoring enough. And he talked about with us, the other day, like, hey, I need to shoot more. I worked on that. I thought about that more. What do you think? Like, how good of a goal scorer can Tim Stutzle be, and should he be this season?
He's shown he can score 30 plus goals in this league. I think like that's kind of the benchmark. And I think if he learns to play a little bit more selfishly, and I almost think that this is a function of the team as well. I think like at times during last season, this team chased quality over quantity, which is fine. Like obviously, like holding onto the puck, the opposition doesn't have the puck. If you just keep cycling and waiting for the perfect chance to arrive, like you eventually a good one should occur. But I think like this team often last year passed up great looks just to try and get a better chance potentially, and it kind of hurt them a little bit. And I think with Tim especially, like he's a pass first guy, and I think he's very similar to Claude Giroux in that respect. Like you're talking about two players with very good shots, high shooting percentages throughout their careers, who can fire the puck. And it's just a matter of just saying, hey, like play a little bit more selfishly. Like you got a good shot, just go get it. And I think with Timmy, especially, on the power play, and at 5-on-5, like if he gets a chance to go and create offense and create space for himself and get shots off, like just take the shot, because he's an exceptional skater, exceptional shooter. But when you're constantly looking for that pass first, you become more predictable. And I think if you start taking more shots, different looks, different angles, it keeps the players honest. It keeps the goaltenders honest. And when you're less predictable, it makes it easier for you to score.
Yeah, no. The other kind of player that I think we haven't, with the kind of concept of, hey, this team needs to score more, like how are they going to score more? Like Brady Tkachuk was banged up. It felt like almost the entire year. He had, I think, 55 points, which was like one of his lowest in the past couple of years. And he was spectacular in the playoffs, clearly being hampered by an injury, at the same time, which is, even more, a testament to him as a player. But I think if he's healthy for the majority of the season, he's going to be that 35, 40 goal guy, 70, 80 points. And just that as a whole augments your offense, and I think he should be only getting better. Like, what's he, 26? He looked really good. Just like he seemed a bit leaner than I'd seen him in past couple of years. And I think, if he's somehow getting more, space and time, like that's deadly for a guy with a great shot and obviously unbelievable in front of the net. But I think that's an underrated storyline, is how good Tkachuk can be just with, a good bill of health and heading into like a big season for him where, he'll be the first one to tell you like the Olympics are on his mind as well.
Mm-hmm. I think like he deserves a lot of credit for getting his shot to where it is now. Like he's turned into a decent shooter from distance, right? Like I think early on in his career, you didn't see those goals. It was mostly like goal mouth scrambles, finishing plays at the net front, because there is a willingness and a desire on his end to like go to the front of the net and be that garbage goal, dirty goal guy. And that's what makes him such a volume shooter, right? Like in terms of all the forwards in the league, like very few players generate a higher rate of shots per game than Brady Tkachuk. And I think like one of these years, because he shoots the puck so often, he's in tight with the goaltenders. I think if there's any luck whatsoever, and he has like one of those years where he shoots like 13-15%, like he's going to get 40-50 goals just based off his shot volume alone. So if he can start creating, continues to create at the rate that he does, and he continues to experiences just a bit of better shooting luck, you can pencil him in for 40-50 like easily. But it's just like that shouldn't be the norm, because I think his norm is going to be like 30-35. It's just there's going to be that 1 year where just everything clicks right.
It's interesting. Like I was looking at his numbers, and like even when the team sucked, he was like awesome possession wise. And you always think about guys that are great at possession or like have filthy mitts and are beautiful skaters that can kind of keep onto the puck, like a McDavid and Matthews and Eichel. But like he's like the opposite. Like it is, I get it around the boards, the puck rim to me, and you're not getting the puck, right? Like it's a man amongst boys. And I think that's an underrated part of his game, is how good he is at keeping a hold on to the puck, keeping possession, creating chances off that, which is like, I don't want to say an underrated skill, but it's not as flashy as, Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel or whoever going through three guys and trying to find a pass or a shooting lane. But I think it's just his play. I think if it goes up to kind of where it has been in the past couple of years, and he should only be getting better, that's going to elevate this team offensively a lot, I think. And that's why I feel like more optimistic. I don't know, maybe it's the September training camp Kool-Aid that we're all drinking, but I do feel as though this team can win the Atlantic Division, at least in the regular season. I don't know if they're ready to go super deep in the playoffs moving forward, but I do think in the regular season, you're deep. You at almost every position, so you can withstand injuries, which makes you, obviously better for the regular season. I think you're young. You've learned how to win. Like should in theory only be getting better. Like I think this team should win the Atlantic Division, because at the very least, I don't think Florida is going to take the regular season very seriously, because why would they? I don't think Toronto's better. I don't think Tampa Bay is better. If anything, I think both those teams are worse, especially in the regular season. And like you look at Montreal, I think they're okay, but are they that good? Buffalo is a tire fire. Detroit, I don't really like. And am I missing someone? Boston, I still just don't think they have enough talent after trading away a lot of guys over the past couple of years. So yeah, I think the Atlantic, like at least for the for the regular season, should be Ottawa's to kind of go after. They might not win it, but I think they should be thinking to themselves, hey, we're one of the 2-3 best teams in this division, and let's make it happen.
Yeah, and again, like the age of some of those teams ahead of them are projected to be ahead of them. Most of those teams are in their 30s. Like Tampa, that's an old team. I like what they did. They added some depth, some quality depth. Like, last year they added Gord and Bjorkstrand. That just improved their depth, and they gave up a little bit of prospect capital and draft picks to do it. But like their window is closing, and it's closing fast. And like if they don't win again this year or take another step and compete for a cup this year, like that might be it. And I think with Florida, like Matthew Tkachuk is hurt. How long is he going to be out? If he's out for a few months, that's going to impact the regular season standings. So I think we chatted about Travis Hamonic and Jordan Spence earlier. Like, you look at Evolving Hockey's wins above replacement value, and Travis Hamonic was like negative 1.6. You look at Jordan Spence, he was like plus 1.7. Well, that's like a 3-win swing just by switching those two players based on the production and play last year. So I mean, if you're talking about three wins, what does 3 wins mean in the standings? 6 points. Well, add 6 points to Ottawa where they were last year, and like obviously every team can do this. Say, hey, if we just had this little bit better luck or this player, it would have added to it. But I mean, Ottawa hasn't really changed much, right? It's a very status quo offseason for the Senators. I think those subtle changes where it's like adding a Lars Eller to the fourth line or adding a Jordan Spence to this group. It's going to make like those small incremental gains are going to be like massive just in terms of the standings. So like I think it's going to be I think the Atlantic's going to be really, really tight. But yeah, like I could totally envision Ottawa finishing like top 2, top 3 in the Atlantic. It's just things are inevitably going to have to go right for this team to get there. And I think some of that, what has to go right is the play and performance of the goaltenders. We haven't talked goaltending at all, but
I was going to go there.
How many games is Linus Ullmark going to play? Okay, well now for a guy who hasn't played more than 50 games during the regular season, is Levi Merlainen going to play at a high enough level to absorb those lack of games on Ullmark's part? I think there's going to be pressure on the goalies, like inevitably. Like Ullmark last year said, there's an adjustment factor. It's getting used to the players in front of you. It's learning the system, the tendencies of the guys around you, so you can predict where shots are going to come from more easily. And when you can start doing that, it makes the saves a little bit easier for him. So I think, with another year of familiarity, I think like Ullmark would probably be the first to say his performance in the playoffs is okay, but it wasn't at the standard that he expects of himself. Yeah. And like, he's got a big year facing him as well if he wants to go to the Olympics with Sweden, right? Like, he got bypassed for the World Championship, so like maybe he'll have a chip on his shoulder entering this season. And if he plays at a high level and Merlainen can come close to replicating what he did last year, I think like this team's in really, really, really good shape.
I do think there's a bit of a pendulum though on the goaltending, because in a weird way, because like Ullmark really had these like droughts and then these highs throughout the season, where he started the season, he had the great game in his first game of the season, and then he kind of wasn't that good for a while, and then he had the crazy December stretch where he was unbeatable for 7-8 games, and they went on that, was it a 6 or 7 game winning streak, and then he got injured, and then he came back and was rusty, and then kind of regained his form a little bit. But and that happens in a hockey season, right? Like, no one's ever gonna really have like a 950 forever. Like, no one does anymore. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it didn't inspire like complete confidence that he's going to be an all-world goaltender. And he's a year older. He's had injury history, as you mentioned. He's never played more than 50 games, right? So, you're kind of believing that you're going to probably play in the 35 to 40 game range, your backup goaltender. I believe in Levi Merlainen. You look at how well he's done in the AHL, at youth level, like the way he played in Ottawa, like, and I think, just his mindset, like we've talked to him before, like he's a cool cucumber. And I think that's what you need from your goaltender, is just like the Carey Price, like stone face. Like, you just need to be, nothing kind of rattles you. And it felt like that from him, but you never know. Like, it's goaltending, and you have a couple bad starts to the season, and then you're in your head, and it's your first year really as like a, backup goaltender, or at least like a full-time NHLer. How does that go? But I do think like if Ullmark gets hurt, Merlainen, maybe, the lights are too bright this year, which they weren't last year. And then you don't really have, like, I don't feel confident in Matt Sogard. He's been good in the AHL, but I could see where it kind of turns the wrong way, like it has in Ottawa for the past couple of years, because they don't have that solid third goaltender, and because of Merlainen's experience, and I think Ullmark's up and down play combined with his health, past health problems in the past.
Yeah, I think you covered everything there. I think I think with Ullmark, it's just a matter of like, I think there is context for his poor play, right? Like, he goes back early on, and then he came back and he was rusty, and it took him time to get going. He finally gets going, and then experiences another injury, comes back, and he's still rusty. I think if it was just up and down play or inconsistent play, like I think like, we've watched Matt Murray play here for stretches. We've watched Joonas Korpisalo play here for stretches, and it's like there was no context for their performance other than the fact that they just weren't great goaltenders at this stage of their professional careers. And I think with Ullmark, I think you can see you see a lot of sample size of him playing at a high level, and if you want to extend that to Merlainen as well, I think if you watch Merlainen's game last year, like just between his composure, his athleticism, like he's square, and then he's not the biggest guy either, but he's not the smallest guy either. But like, no. He's square, and then he relies on his athleticism the way he plays, where I think like Ottawa hasn't had that a lot in years past. It's more like, we're going to acquire big goalies who are just, if they get beat, they get beat. They don't have the athleticism to scramble and make second or third saves. It's just, you hope they make the first one. And I think that's kind of been like the struggle for a guy like Sogard. And I think you're right. Like, if someone gets injured and you're relying on that guy to play like 15, 20 games, then yeah, that could be the difference between you playing postseason games or not. But there are very few organizations in the NHL right now who are, if like one of your top two guys goes down, there's not that guy in the minors who's going to step in and kind of carry the torch for you. So I don't know if Ottawa's any different than other teams out there. It's just, I think there is a marked drop in the talent level between Ottawa's first, second, and third goalies.
But how would you explain Allmark's play in the playoffs? Because I don't think he played that well. I don't think the whole series. It's not like I wouldn't say he lost in the series, but I think he could have won him that series, and he didn't, right? And he has struggled in the playoffs in the past, and he seemed to be healthy. So that's where I'm like a bit worried. Is he the guy with the right mindset, or is he just in the right place at the right time in his career where he can be that guy? I mean, he won a Vezina trophy. He's clearly super talented and has had stretches of unbelievable play like he did last year. But I think I just worry about, okay, like, is he the guy that can take them into becoming an elite team? I think he clearly solidified the net, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And Steve Staios deserves a lot of credit for acquiring a goalie that is clearly like a good NHL goalie. But I think to be a really great team, you need a great NHL goaltender, and he has been great. But I think the question will be not just during the regular season, but I think most importantly in the playoffs, is he that guy? And I wonder about Levi Marilainen, that if he keeps playing the way that he's been playing, does he start to sneak into, like, maybe we have a goalie controversy, like, or a guy, kind of both of them battling it out for who plays game one? Because I think talent-wise, Levi Marilainen has everything you need to be that goaltender. Can he put it all together for a long stretch of time or at the right time? Who knows? That's what we'll find out this season. But I'm just curious about that, not just for this year, but moving forward as both of those guys progress with the Sens.
Sure. And I think like having internal competition where you can push like the 1A or the 1B guy is great. And if it elevates both of their games, and if they just provide good goaltending for the Senators and allow them to have a chance every night to win, I think that's pretty much all you can ask for at this stage. And I understand your points about the postseason, Allmark, but I think there's a lot of context for a lot of the goals, or many of the goals that went in during that Toronto series. It's just like some of them went in off players' legs, like Nick Jensen's leg, and went into the net. And did he see all of the shots, whether it was on Benoit's shot from the point or Max Domi's shot in game 2 that won in overtime? Like, I think there's just like, would it have been absolutely nice to have the puck hit him and get it saving those chances? Yes, obviously. But at the same time, I think there's such a tendency to like kind of over romanticize the postseason, look at a small sample size and say, oh man, like we could have used some more saves there. But it's like, I think a lot of people look at like Patrick Lalim's career here in Ottawa and say, man, like, he was great the postseason for us. And it's like, yeah, his postseason numbers were pretty damn good. And yeah, like Nieuwendyk beat him twice, and that's what people remember. And his playoff numbers were pretty good. But I think if you actually look at his record and stats in game deciding or series deciding games, like historically, they weren't very good outside of that series against Philadelphia. So I don't like, it's just, it's small sample sizes is what people remember.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's almost like I'm just like, okay, like not the Amber Alert, but like, it's like, I just have a bit of a yellow light, like just flashing. Like I'm just,
that's totally different than an Amber Alert.
Yeah, it is. I was like, I said the wrong freaking thing, but which is typically what you'll see on the show. But yeah, I'm just curious to see where that goes and how it does. But I think the Sens are definitely, as you said, way better positioned than they have been in the past. And this is not the era of Matt Murray or Jonas Corposalo or Cam Talbot. It's much better. And the other thing is that I think the team is just so much better defensively in front of them that they don't need to be spectacular for this team to be good, right? They need good goaltending, but they don't need great goaltending to save their butt like they did in the past. So
no, and I also like the fact that they're giving an opportunity to a young kid who's had a little bit of success at the NHL level, right? Like whether it was like Phil Gustafson a few years ago or Joey Decord, they didn't
all hit.
They could have held on to one of those talents. They obviously lost one of them in the expansion draft to Seattle, and then Gustafson, they traded away, trying to get another veteran guy, but like they're comfortable rolling with a young kid for the first time in years. And I think like I have a lot of confidence in Marilainen's game based off the sample size that I've seen, based off his track history, his age, and having success at the AHL level, the junior level, and everything else. And it's kind of refreshing to see. And I hope he does really well this year. And I think I agree with you. I think like he could perform at a high enough level where it's like you can actually have conversations about, hey, maybe this should be like a 1A, 1B situation where he'll wind up stealing games away from Ullmark, which might not be bad because you want to keep Ullmark healthy as well. So like I think in the new modern NHL era, the days of goaltenders playing, 55, 65, 70 games, like those are over.
Yeah, for sure. But before I let you go, Graeme, who's an X factor for you? Like, who's kind of the litmus test for this team as to like they're going up or they're going down? Like, who do you think is going to be like the most important player to watch this season for the Sens?
I think a lot of people will probably say Zetterlund just on the basis that he didn't produce very much while he was here. And for me, I think there's enough under the hood with Zetterlund that I'm not worried about his player or production whatsoever. Like he's going to get his 20 plus goals this year without question. The guy for me who I'm most curious to see this season is Dylan Cousins, because I think if he can, not that I'm expecting him to have a huge year or anything like that, but like just being further removed from Buffalo, having an opportunity to know his team, the system, the structure, and everything else. Like he's a guy who was drafted in the top 10 several years ago. Like he's got a ton of talent. It's just a matter of like, can he put it together? Is the hockey sense that he has going to allow him to become like an upper echelon, not first line player, but like, is he going to be a very good second line center player for this team? And I think like, the strength of this team up front is down the middle, like you mentioned earlier. So if he has a huge season, I think it bodes well for Ottawa's chances. Like that's good. Him having success is going to allow Ottawa to climb that Atlantic ladder and kind of solidify themselves as like potentially the top team in the Atlantic, maybe the second or third. So I think like if he struggles, that can impact Drake Batherson's season. Like there's plenty of different ways you can look at it, but like for me, him as being like a swing guy is huge. And if he doesn't play well, I think that'll afford a guy like Shane Pinto the opportunity to kind of seize that job from him. So I think Cousins is the X factor for me, but I think if Shane Pinto has a good season, he could put pressure on potentially creating a better, bigger role for him in the skill spot. So like that's kind of like the battle I'm kind of curious to see all season is Cousins and Pinto, and ultimately it's like the goaltending debate that we just had, right? Like internal competition creates better opportunities, and if everyone's playing at a relatively strong level, then it's a great thing for the organization, and it's a great thing for the team's chances of having success.
I totally agree. And I think Pinto, I've said a ton on the show, so I'm not going to reiterate the same thing, but I think he is such an interesting player this season as to what his role will be. Will he sign an extension? How well he plays? Because he's clearly proven himself to be that defensive ace, as I mentioned to her before. But, is he closer to 25, 20, like high 20s goals? Is he, in the teens? Does he get power play time? Does he become a better playmaker, which I think we've talked about off the air? Like, I think that's the one area of his game that if he got a bit better at would really open things up to him, because he has that amazing shot. He is great defensively. He is a good skater, but doesn't really create a lot of plays on his own. He's more of a finisher, but that's why I think he should be on the second power play unit. To me, he has one of the 2 or 3 best shots on the team, and I think he should be on the power play. But
the loss of Adam Gaudette will create that opportunity, right? It should in theory create that opportunity. But Travis Green's also gone on the record saying several times, like when the power play ends, he likes going to his third line because the opposition will put their skilled players immediately on the ice, get them back out there. So I understand that the philosophy of not using Pinto on the power play, but at the same time, you're right. Like he probably deserves to be there based off the value of his shot. So again, another storyline to watch as the season progresses.
The one player that I'm really curious about in a weird way is just Ridley Gregg, because at the tail end of the season, basically after he signed his contract extension, the offense started to come around a little bit. It wasn't great in the playoffs, but he was against the Matthews line, so like there is some context there. But I think like he's one of the only players outside of, maybe we see Yakimchuk later in the season, or maybe he cracks the team, but he's still pretty young. And he's one player that you can see like blossoming. Obviously, he's a fan favorite for the slap shot and getting in Stolar's face and how he, goes about things as like an ultimate pest. But I still think there's a little bit more offense there, and he clearly adjusted to the left wing position pretty well by the end of the season. And he's kind of that Swiss Army knife kind of, you can put him in, everywhere in the lineup. I don't think, he's a, top line player, but I think if he can kind of juice a little bit more offense out of there, like he did at the end of the year, and that it looked like he had become 2 seasons ago, and then he got a high ankle sprain that is a really hard injury to come back from. Drake Batherson had it when he was popping off in the 21 season, and then he kind of regressed for a couple of years and then slowly came back. Like that injury takes a while, but I'm just really curious to see how much offense we get from him, and how much if he maybe starts pushing like, hey, I'm closer to a 20 goal guy maybe, and now maybe should I be playing in the top 6 on the left wing? That is kind of a hole, depending on where Giroux and Zetterlund play. So he's just another player that I'm curious to see this season as to like how he evolves his game as someone that is still young enough to do so.
Yeah, and I think he was a Swiss Army knife, right? Like before Zetterlund was acquired, he was the guy who was kind of going up and down the lines and sliding around different positions as well. Like he played a little bit of center at times last year due to injuries and stuff. So he's a guy who, like if there's going to be a natural progression in offensive production, like he's a guy that you would point to and say, there's probably a little bit more to give. Like 13 goals and 34 points last year in 78 games. Like he could flirt. If everything broke right, he's a guy who could potentially flirt with 20. Do I expect a ton of more production out of him? No, probably not. But like I could see him crack 40 points. Like he could be a 20 goal, 40 point guy for this team. And I think like you talk about internal production. So I think like him, Pinto, like what do those guys have to give to you offensively? Like to me, is Shane Pinto just like a 25 goal, 40 point guy, or like what? It's those guys. It's going to be like that natural progression. Because I think you're right. Like Tim Stutzle, you know what he is. He's a point per game player, maybe more. Brady Tkachuk, he'll go get you your 35 goals and 70 points. You can bank on that. Drake Batherson, 25 goals, 60 points. You can bank on that. But it's like those other guys, if they can just if they can have career years or just like continue to naturally progress offensively, I think like those will be the little incremental gains that this team needs. We've been talking incremental gains like throughout the course of this podcast, whether it's the back end or up front, but like those are the small gains that will make a difference between this team being a wild card team or first in the Atlantic.
We're like Steve Stamkos in process and internal growth. It's just all we say. It's incremental.
Yeah. But I think they're also I think they're also in a good position too, because like, they just, I mean, I don't know. We talk about adding elite talent and everything else. Like this team's in a good position to add if they wanted to. You know, they have some cap room and some flexibility moving forth because the cap will continue to go up. They have young talent already locked under contract with the exception of Pinto, who will need an extension. But like this team's in a really good spot. So they can go out and make a move if they needed to. I just don't know. And I mentioned this on Coming in Hot as well. I just don't know if they have to draft capital or assets to go and do it. So that's the one concern. But certainly if a good player becomes available, like Steve Stamkos is diligent, it seems like they kick tires on everyone. So if this team's looking to make an addition, I think up front is where they're going to do it. And they're going to try and find that frontline player that can play in the top 6.
I feel like next season is the year where they start thinking, okay, do we go, they don't have that many chips, on the table, but hey, is this time to kind of go a bit more all in? I don't think this is the year. Like, I think if there's a Zetterlund type trade or even like Cousins type of trade, they're going to do that because they feel like it's optimizing the roster, but they didn't, give up a boatload of picks or prospects for either of those moves, right? They got a second round pick and then traded one in the Zetterlund and like Stapchuk, who's like, not nothing, but not anything significant. So I think that's where they're at right now because they don't have their first round pick this year, of course, or we'll see.
I was waiting for you to get to it. So we'll see. But like they have all their picks. They have all their picks in 2027, 2028. So like, you're right. Like those are the years that you could potentially go about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's find a way to get this pick back. But
yeah. And I think that's also when the roster's optimized. Like Tim Stutzle, Jake Sanderson are like 25, like really in their prime. Same with Brady.
Brady will
obviously
be closing in on the last year of his deal. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that'll be it. That will not be discussed. It'll be like Quinn Hughes going to New Jersey. That that never comes up. But
yeah.
Before I let you go, I guess just what's your prediction for the season? Like, where do you think the Sens will land this year? And maybe, I mean, I won't say how far will they go in the playoffs, but you can throw that in too if you want.
I will say they finished third in the Atlantic, and they will win a round in the postseason.
See, I'm going to go, they're going to come second in the Atlantic, but I feel the same way. I think they're going to win a round in the playoffs. I think they're kind of primed for that. As you mentioned, just with the teams in the Atlantic, I don't think they're going to be outside of Florida. If they played Florida and lost, I don't think that's, a bad omen or anything. Like Elliot Friedman always says now with the playoffs, it's like who you lose to rather than when.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be it. But if they played anyone outside of Florida, I really feel like they'd have a great chance to win that first round. And then,
and again, like you look at the teams in the Atlantic, like Florida has played a lot of games, high stakes games. They haven't had a ton of rest the past 2 years. Matthew Tkachuk's hurt. Like inevitably, I think there's going to be a drop in the regular season performance. And then Tampa, I don't like their blue line very much. And that's a huge issue. They don't have a ton of draft capital. I don't see that team making significant gains or additions throughout the course of the season. So they got to essentially rely on what's there, and what's there is old and theoretically should be in decline. So we'll see what happens. And then Toronto lost Mitch Marner, right? So who's a great regular season performer for them? Subtle
playoffs?
Subtle dig, So again, like I think that like every organization right now has its flaws. I just like with Ottawa, I think it's just, do they have enough high end talent to make that jump? And I think you alluded to that earlier in the show, but I think like, comparing Ottawa's depth to the others in that division, I think they have the quality of depth to go with those teams and to match up with those teams. It's just a matter of, do they get enough out of their guys to make that jump to that upper echelon and position themselves towards the top of the Atlantic? And I just don't know if it's there yet, but I think there's a lot to like about this group right now.
The one thing I will say is I don't think any fan base, well, maybe Buffalo, but Ottawa fans really deserve where this team's at. Like, it's just so interesting, like being around the city, and like we both live here, of course, but just like I'm at the gym, I see way more Sens gear. Like there just seems, obviously you played the Leafs in the playoffs, and like by the end of, those couple of weeks, like there were Sens flags everywhere. People wearing Sens jerseys. Like I just felt like my childhood where the people cared about the team and were like all in. And I think, they're going to try to build off this enthusiasm. And I think this year will be, you never know, but I think it's going to be a really fun year for fans and for the team. And it will feel like another kind of stepping stone and like growth of enthusiasm that has just, it felt like for, literally since from 2017 to 2023, like it was just raw. And I'm glad that, just for the fan base that, people have a pep in their step and people are excited for Sens hockey.
Yeah. And I think it's like a confidence and enthusiasm that starts at the top and trickles down, right? Like I think finally, this group of fans has been invested in this young core of players for several years now. You're just waiting for the organization and the business side of it to catch up, right? And I think now that they've got an owner and a front office and people in management positions who are respected and well liked, and they're great with their messaging and communication. So they've put good people in good positions within the organization. I think you're starting to see that benefit and kind of like that grassroots swell of optimism around this group again. And it's fun. It's been a long time coming, and it's great to see in this community.
For sure. I think it's the Graeme Nichols bump, if I say so myself.
Wouldn't say that. No. Wouldn't say that at all.
Well, Graeme, thanks so much for giving a bump to the show and coming on, and we really appreciate it. And thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Alex, and congrats on the Sick podcast joining that network. It's awesome.
Thank you, buddy. It's been awesome. So looking forward to plenty of podcasts all year and maybe having you on later. So Graeme, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no problem, Alex.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.